Welcome, everybody, to Efficiency Canada's bi-weekly DiscoverEE webinar held every other Friday. The goal of our DiscoverEE webinars is to bring people together who are interested in energy efficiency, the broad world of energy efficiency, to learn, to share research and findings from pilot projects and other research and development type initiatives, innovations, and the like. Just to note that these presentations are recorded and you can access them after the fact, either from our website or our YouTube channel. And just a point of note, I actually just went and had a look at our YouTube channel before this, and there are over 220 videos there, most of which are DiscoverEE videos. So there's a lot of great material there if you want to go through our back channel. So who am I? I am James Gady, Director of Research at Efficiency Canada. It's my pleasure to host this session. I'm based out of Waterloo, Southern Ontario, which is the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Neutral peoples. And today we are welcoming Kari Hyde from the Pembina Institute. Kari has over 20 years of experience in the energy and utility industries with extensive knowledge of North American energy markets, both regulated and deregulated. Kari specializes in distributed energy resource integration, demand response, and energy efficiency, while also driving policy advocacy and program design initiatives to support the energy transition. Kari's joining us today to talk about some of her recent work on how demand-side management, or DSM, can serve as a launch pad for realizing the full potential of distributed energy resources. Just before we get started, a couple quick instructions. So Kari will present for roughly 20 minutes or so, and then we will turn it over to questions and answers from the audience. Questions from the audience, answers from Kari. If you have a question, please use the Q&A function in Zoom and not the chat. It's easier for us to monitor all of the Q&A in one spot. I will also try to keep an eye on the chat, but Q&A is preferred. And with that, I will turn it over to Kari to get started.
Thanks. I'm very excited to be here. I'm just going to share my screen. I'm very excited to be here with Efficiency Canada's DiscoverEE series, unlocking the local grid with distributed energy resources. So across Canada, utility-led demand-side management programs have been the backbone of energy efficiency for decades, helping households and businesses save money, lowering peak demand, and avoiding costly infrastructure. But DSM is just the starting point. Large centralized power plants alone can't get us to an affordable, resilient, and equitable energy future. They take years to build, sit far from where power is used, and don't always serve communities directly. And that's where distributed energy resources, rooftop solar, batteries, smart thermostats, EVs come in. They're decentralized, they can be deployed quickly, and if coordinated, deliver benefits right at the local grid level: affordability, reliability, and community resilience. So today, I'll explore how DSM can evolve into a platform for DER orchestration, what enabling conditions are needed, and how Canadian provinces compare to international leaders. And I'll leave you with this. DSM is not the end goal. It's the foundation for building flexible, democratic, and affordable local grids. As mentioned, I lead the DSM portfolio for the Pembina Institute, which is a national clean energy think tank. At Pembina, we are contributing to a vision of Canada's energy system that is truly end-to-end, from how energy is used in buildings, transportation, and industry, to how energy efficiency and local energy production can contribute to the system through the electricity grid, production of utility-scale renewables, and decarbonization of legacy gas systems. It will take systems thinking and collaboration to deliver on the promise of an economy powered by affordable, reliable, resilient, clean energy. So when I say demand-side management, I mean the full package. Most people often consider the traditional energy efficiency and demand response, but also managing behind the meter, non-wire solutions like rooftop solar, batteries, and EVs. But DER orchestration goes even further. It's DSM plus part of the meter resources like community solar or grid-scale batteries, coordinating both sides of the meter so distributed resources act together like a local power plant. The first benefit of this is affordability. DERs help lower costs across the system. By reducing demand at peak times, households and businesses save on bills and utilities avoid costly upgrades. That's money kept in people's pockets instead of poured into infrastructure. The second is reliability and resilience. Coordinating local resources keeps the grid stable during day-to-day operations and gives us flexibility during stress events like heat waves or supply shortages. These resources act as a safety valve when the grid is under pressure. And the third is equity and participation. Because they can be deployed locally, DERs allow more people and institutions to benefit. Take a school, for example. With solar panels on the roof, it can cut its electricity bills year-round and even earn a revenue stream by selling excess power back to the grid. That frees up money for classrooms, extracurriculars, or community programs, showing how the energy transition can directly improve community life. This slide shows the gap we're dealing with. On the left, today's reality. Across Canada, DSM programs are still too often siloed. They deliver savings, but they don't connect into broader system planning. DER integration is limited, and the grid is still largely one-way. Energy flows from central plants through the wires to customers. On the right is tomorrow's vision. DSM programs connected with distributed energy resources to form coordinated local energy systems. Instead of isolated programs and one-way energy use, local grids become responsive networks that interact with the grid in real time, with energy flowing in both directions. The result is optimized local networks that are more affordable, more resilient, and more democratic, where customers aren't just consumers but participants in the grid. And that's the transformation we're talking about, moving from siloed DSM to coordinated DER orchestration. So bridging this gap. The gap today is between fragmented programs and tomorrow's coordinated local grid. Bridging it takes 4 enablers moving together. 1, policy innovation. Let's put energy efficiency, demand response, and DER in one playbook, so utilities can plan and procure them as the resources. 2, interconnection. Clear, fast, transparent rules with hosting capacity maps. 3, regulation. Outcomes-based, performance-based regulation frameworks that reward using non-wire solutions before building assets. And 4, fair compensation for DER, tech-agnostic, value-stacked with equity adders. Align these when we defer upgrades, cut bills, and strengthen reliability. Most provinces already support DSM, and that's important. DSM reduces demand, lowers bills, and avoids some infrastructure upgrades, but stopping there leaves value on the table. The bigger opportunity comes when DSM is connected to DER, both in front of and behind the meter, and orchestrated through those local utilities. That requires policy innovation. DSM needs to evolve from just saving kilowatt hours into a platform for integration. Other jurisdictions show what's possible. In New York, regulators require utilities to treat customer resources as alternatives to substation upgrades. In Hawaii, storage incentives turned thousands of home batteries into dispatchable capacity for the grid. Both examples prove that when policies align utilities and customers, DER delivers cost-effective system-level benefits. So the question isn't whether DSM is valuable. It is. The real question is whether we use DSM as a launchpad for building more flexible, affordable, and resilient local grids. So this table shows how provinces stack up, and I apologize, it's pocket busy looking. But essentially, every province except Alberta has some form of DSM policy. That's the baseline. What's missing almost everywhere is explicit policy direction for DER coordination to provide grid services. Ontario is the one partial exception. With the Ontario Energy Board's non-wires guidance, the ISO's DER roadmap, and the province's integrated energy plan all moving in the direction of integrating DER. But for BC, Nova Scotia, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, DSM is there, but is being delivered well below its potential, and DERs and non-wires aren't named in policy at all. Alberta is the outlier, with no enabling DSM policy to begin with. So the takeaway is simple. DSM policy exists across Canada, but it hasn't evolved to make local DERs and non-wire solutions part of most utility planning. But even when policy signals do exist, DERs can't scale if it's too hard to get them connected to the grid. Right now in Canada, interconnection rules are inconsistent. Each utility has its own process, approvals are often slow, and customers or developers face a maze of technical requirements. This lack of cohesion makes projects expensive and unpredictable, and it discourages innovation. To unlock DER, we need streamlined, standardized processes. That means clear, transparent timelines for connection, studies, and approvals, consistent technical requirements across utilities, and tools like hosting capacity maps so developers and communities can see where the grid has room before they even apply. Internationally, we've seen how powerful this is. In the UK, the G99 standard created a national set of interconnection rules for distributed generation and storage. In New York, utilities are required to publish hosting capacity maps and follow standardized interconnection timelines. These changes dramatically reduced barriers and sped up DER deployment. So the big idea here is if we want DERs to be a real local grid resource, interconnection can't be a black box. It has to be simple, transparent, and consistent. That's what transforms DERs from one-off projects into reliable, scalable grid assets. So our key challenge here is that interconnection rules and timelines differ across provinces and utilities, slowing DER adoption and creating uncertainty for those wanting to connect. Hosting capacity maps give visibility into the grid by showing both available capacity and areas of constraint. They help customers and developers see where DERs can connect easily and where non-wire solutions could be used instead of expensive infrastructure upgrades. Ontario, Alberta, and BC provide some hosting capacity information, but it is inconsistent. Other provinces offer no transparency, leaving customers in the dark and creating inequities. What is needed is province-wide hosting capacity maps paired with consistent, transparent interconnection rules. This would speed up approvals, reduce costs, and create a level playing field for customers and developers. Regulation is the biggest enabler, and it's also one of the biggest barriers. It sets the rules of the game, and right now those rules are generally stacked against integration of DER. Under the traditional cost of service model, utilities are more than just cost recovery on capital projects. They earn a regulated rate of return. That means poles, wires, transformers, and substations are not only reimbursed, they're financially rewarded. By contrast, operational dollars, which are used for investment in things like demand-side programs or non-wire solutions, at best qualify for cost recovery, but they generally don't earn any return. So even when regulators encourage utilities to consider demand-side management or DER integration, the structure makes capital projects the default choice. Modernized regulatory frameworks change that balance. Instead of rewarding utilities only for what they build, they reward them for what they deliver: reliability, affordability, decarbonization, participation, and flexibility services. This is called performance-based regulation. And within that framework, regulators use performance incentive mechanisms, or PIMs, to tie utility earnings directly to those outcomes. That way, utilities can succeed financially by meeting system needs in a smarter, more cost-effective ways. International examples show how this works. In the UK, Ofgem's RIIO framework, which is revenue equals incentives plus innovation plus outputs, ties part of utility revenues to outcomes like service quality, decarbonization, and explicit support for vulnerable customers. In New York, earning adjustment mechanisms under the Reforming the Energy Vision Initiative provide utilities with incentives to integrate DERs, expand affordability programs, and ensure participation by low and median income households, not just those who can afford rooftop solar or batteries. The lesson is clear. If utilities can only earn returns on wires and substations, they'll always default to wires and substations. But when regulators align incentives around affordability, reliability, and inclusion, non-wire solutions become viable business cases. That's how regulation unlocks DER orchestration, not as a side project, but as a core part of building fair, affordable, and resilient local grids. Most of Canada still operates under cost of service. That means utilities earn their regulated return for building infrastructure, but at best, can only recover costs for DSM or non-wires. Even Alberta's performance-based regulation model encourages cost control and efficiency in spending, but the incentive is mostly financial prudency, which doesn't include mechanisms tied to grid modernization or decarbonization and affordability. So in practice, it functions similar to cost of service too. Hawaii shows what a modernized PBR can look like. Their framework explicitly incentivizes outcomes. Utilities earn by integrating customer-sided batteries, solar, and demand response into grid services, by keeping bills affordable, and by expanding access for low and moderate income households. In other words, utilities are financially motivated to choose DERs and demand-side solutions. They're not penalized for it. Fair compensation is the glue that makes distributed energy resources viable. The principle is simple. Pay distributed energy resources for the actual value they provide. Make sure participation is technology agnostic and embed equity so the benefits don't just flow to those who can afford rooftop solar and EVs. Best practice means stacking value streams, energy, capacity at peak, local deferral, and other grid services, and making sure clean energy resources are fully recognized in that stack. On top of that, we need adders for low and moderate income households, schools, and Indigenous communities and the like. So participation is broad, not exclusive. And we need predictable long-term frameworks and contracts so communities and developers can finance these projects with confidence. Other jurisdictions show what this looks like. New York's value stack DER tariff pays DERs based on when and where they help the system, unlocking community solar at scale. Hawaii built incentives directly into its regulatory models, so utilities earn by integrating those batteries. And in Australia, dynamic export limits make sure customers can export more when the grid can take it and less when it can't, making it fair for everyone. Here in Canada, Ontario is the only province really starting to move on this. Today, compensation is still net metering with a few community pilots, but through Bill 214, the province gave itself the authority to write new rules for DER. The Ontario Energy Board is now exploring how local utilities could be enabled to procure and compensate DERs in a way that supports affordability, reliability, and community participation. Compensation frameworks need to evolve from one-off credits into value-based inclusive programs. That's what turns DERs into a true local grid resource. And finally, provincial governments have a role to play in unlocking broader participation in DER as well. This goes beyond regulation and compensation. It's about making adoption affordable, accessible, and equitable. Provinces can lower upfront costs through rebates, tax credits, and low-interest financing. In New York, families not only get tax credits for installing solar, but also a 15-year property tax exemption so they aren't penalized when they install it. In Australia, the Solar Homes program combines rebates and loans, making rooftop solar possible for millions of households, including lower-income families. Access and equity means making sure DERs aren't just for homeowners with rooftops. One of the most powerful tools is community net metering or virtual sharing. These are front-of-the-meter projects. The system connects directly to the grid and participants earn bill credits even if the panels aren't on their roof. That's different from behind-the-meter projects like a school putting solar on its roof to cut its own bills. In a front-of-the-meter community model, the same school could host a larger system, and households in the community, including renters and low-income families, can subscribe and receive credits on their bills. This is how we open the door of broad participation. When paired with equity adders for low-income households, Indigenous communities, and schools, these models ensure DER programs are inclusive rather than exclusive. And third, provincial leadership. Governments can modernize permitting and codes to cut costs and delays. They can also lead by example, deploying DER in schools, recreation centers, and public housing to reduce operating costs and reinvest savings into classrooms, community services, and local programs. When provinces align financial tools, community access, and equity priorities, DERs become a driver of affordability and resilience across the whole community, not just for early adopters. So to close, here's my challenge to you. Think about your own province. Which of the four enablers is most urgent to advance? Is it policy innovation, interconnection, regulation, or compensation? Second, make equity part of the conversation from day one. DER will only transform our grids if renters, low-income families, Indigenous communities, and schools are able to participate. And third, engage with policymakers and regulators. They hold the keys to enabling frameworks, and they need to hear that there are proven models from other jurisdictions that Canada can adapt. If we each pick one enabler, push equity, and bring governments along, we can start building the local, affordable, and resilient grids Canada needs. These are just some resources that Pembina has written on DSM and the value of DER. I really appreciated the time to share some of my thoughts on unlocking DER for local grid. Thank you.
Okay, great. That was excellent, Kari. Very interesting. It's a topic that is near and dear to my heart. So I was really interested to hear about the work that you've been doing. I'll give people a couple seconds to collect their thoughts and get some questions in. We have a couple already, but I might just exercise my position of authority and ask a few of my own. I don't know how to phrase this exactly. You mentioned the DER DSM integration is not really being integrated in utility planning or incorporated in utility planning. And you walked us through a series of policy and regulatory barriers that are keeping it out. Are there non-policy or regulatory barriers, maybe within the utilities, that's contributing to the lack of movement here?
Absolutely. I consider the four that I talked about the key enablers, but there's also things like how far along is your utility in its technology adoption? If I look in Alberta, for instance, not every utility has true AMI metering potential. Without that, it makes it very difficult to do this. So things like advanced data metering, data management systems, AMI 2.0, which allows for that 5-minute or less interval metering so that real time can be introduced so that you get that flexibility you need in ramping resources up and down. Those are critical to distributed energy resource management systems and the like. I would say that's another key area. Depending on how far along your system is and how well connected it is, you may or may not have those supports in place. And that would be another part aside from that needs to be fixed.
Is it a bit of a chicken and an egg situation with utility investments in AMI and what's the ADMS, Automated Distributed Resource Management? I
Yeah.
forget the acronym. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's a chicken and egg because I know from our research, some utilities are much further ahead on this than others. And it's not clear to me exactly what accounts for the difference. If it's like the utility doesn't necessarily see a need for it, barring some other thing to happen, or maybe those are also similarly blocked by policy or regulatory situations.
Yeah, I would suggest it's a combination of both. I think first and foremost, utilities are always being challenged on costs. And so what do you need a DERMS platform for? You really just need to be able to do a monthly bill read and send out that information to your customer. That's not what true AMI has the potential to do. In understanding what those upfront costs are, I think does matter a little bit, but also how much more you're unlocking. If you look at the Brooklyn Queens demand management program that New York did in 2018, 2019 with NLX, they avoided a $1 billion substation upgrade using $200,000 worth of DER demand response and energy efficiency programs. So yes, they needed to invest in some technology to get there, but it's quite apparent the savings were much greater than those costs.
Excellent. I'll turn over to some of our community questions here. And the first one on the list is, where do you see the inclusion of transactive energy that is not through the utility, but sharing the wires if it's beneficial to both parties? I'm not 100% sure what the questioner is getting at there. It might be.
Are they talking about just a one-to-one?
Sounds like that. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. In most of the cases on the bulk system, absolutely you can have one-to-one transactional, but we're talking more about local level, not the ISO level, not the transmission and that level, but below. Usually you do have to aggregate those resources. One household with solar panels is not going to help with a feeder or a substation issue. So generally there are aggregators that come in and procure those resources, and the contract exists between the utility and the aggregator in order to get the right amount at the right time into the system doing what needs to happen for that flexibility. I would suggest maybe some local level services like front of the meter community solar could possibly do one-to-one type transactive connections. I think it would look the same though, pretty much. Like the benefits flow both ways, and the community center who has that ability to do that would receive credits and rewards for doing so. And the utility still incurs those services for using non-wires instead of having to build.
Okay. Great. Yeah. Thanks. And apologies, David, if I misunderstood your question, but I think that's what you were getting at. So next up, this is something that we've heard at Efficiency Canada before, actually, and it concerns performance-based regulation. So the question is, do you think performance-based regulation is required for Crown Corporation utilities? And what's your argument for those that say that it doesn't, which is what we have heard from time to time in Efficiency Canada and tangential? Should performance-based regulation seek to decouple utility revenues from sales via something like a bill cap?
Okay, so there's two questions. I think absolutely. I think performance-based regulation should happen in Crown utilities. The reason is First of all, there's two parts. So cost of service is literally the utility tells their regulator that, hey, these are the things that we have to build in order to ensure that we have the ability to deliver power at scale with population growth, with electrification increases and all these things. So they basically state, here's how much money we're going to need to do that. And then they just have to prove a little bit of financial prudency and they get paid with that amortization over years. So they earn their regulated rate of return. With performance-based regulation, first of all, they get a bucket of money. And what happens is they basically say, okay, if you prove efficiency, if you do some other things that actually lower your need to build and you save costs in other places, you can share in whatever's left of that bucket if you don't use it all. The problem is with both of these models is capital intensive upgrades are rewarded. Both of them earn a regulated rate of return on them. Without adding performance incentive mechanisms, you cannot ensure that the outcomes combine with what's really necessary on the grid, which might be decarbonization initiatives or affordability or flexibility outcomes. Performance incentive mechanisms, I think, are critical. You cannot just enable build. We're going to price people off the grid if we continue to just work in that model. So yes, I think it works for both private corporations and deregulated. On the second piece, decoupling, revenue decoupling is a big issue in Alberta. So yes, in Alberta, utilities are rewarded through a price cap mechanism on energy throughput. I absolutely believe you have to decouple that because by saving money, by saving energy and reducing and shifting load, you are now penalizing that utility for not putting through energy throughput. So I do think some form of decoupling, whether it's full or there's something else, aligned with performance incentive mechanisms is the right way to go about that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Moving down the list here, what pathways could Alberta use to enable DSM? And how complicated or feasible do you think that would be?
Oh, there are some. I've spent a lot of my prior probably 8-9 years in industry trying to enable this within Alberta. Shout out to a report that's coming out probably the week of October 6th on retrofit aligned DSM and how that also increases job growth and GDP growth overarchingly. The first thing is policy. So we actually need a policy that states that Alberta should look into utilizing DSM in all its forms in order to reduce costs of capital infrastructure upgrades to customers. Then secondly, I would say, I believe our Utilities Commission, first of all, regulators are very risk averse and they generally take their lead from government. So the policy has to be in place that enables the AUC to put a mandate forward that says, yes, we believe there's value here and we want utilities to work with us on what this could look like within Alberta. What models and structures make the most sense, given that we have 4 regulated distribution utilities, a few municipal ones, and then some REAs. So how do we make that work within that context? But overarchingly, I think the problem is the Alberta Utilities Commission thought performance-based regulation would enable utilities to just do this. It doesn't, because they don't even know if they can get cost recovery on the basic operational dollars, let alone any form of return. So without that explicitly added in, without those PIMs being there and some of that decoupling, yeah, it's just not something utilities are going to go ahead and do.
Thanks, Kari. I'm going to ask a question that I don't personally understand myself, as it's getting into the technical details. Do you know if standard reliability metrics like SAIDI or
Yeah,
do you see where I am? You see
I do.
allow a utility to perform against the metrics, reducing power outage risks and through distributed batteries?
So in a modernized PBR framework, there are performance mechanisms that have to stay in place. Safety, reliability, all those things do need to stay there. But you do have to couple them with performance incentive mechanisms, looking at other outcomes that you're looking for. So yes, I think those measures do stay for the most part, but you also tend to increase safety, reliability, affordability by using non-wire solutions. If you think about outages on the system, when you have very centralized generation, large swaths of customers come off at the same time if you lose a giant substation. If a lot of your stuff is more locally connected, you might lose a feeder here, but you're not going to lose that entire system. So I would argue that as much as those are needed, I think they're enhanced by adding performance incentive mechanisms.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, excuse me. I was paying attention to that and not reading the questions. Okay, so the first question off the top of my list is a question about how Australia has been able to ramp up PV and battery use so much. I don't know if you're familiar with the Australia case or can speak to, but if you are, any idea what we can learn from Australia?
Yeah, I have a little bit of knowledge on Australia. I did a jurisdictional scanner at one point. Mostly what they've done is to provide rebates and tax incentives for customers to come and bring their solar. I believe it was Tesla who worked with them and actually enabled a solar program that went really broadly across Australia. And so the minute you have somebody that's incentivizing to that level, you're going to have a lot of participation. The one difference with Australia is they're doing VPP mostly, so virtual power plants. So they aggregate these resources and then use them as virtual power plants, but they do it mostly on the bulk system level. So they don't have a lot of local resourcing of DERs.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay, so here's a question. I don't know to the extent to which this is specific to Ontario. Maybe it is. I'm not sure. What would you recommend municipalities do to enable more community scale DERs? The person asking this question notes that their particular LDC, which is, I think, Ontario
Local
specific acronym,
distribution.
yeah, can be a bit of a barrier, even though that the ISO is in this direction. So maybe I'll just pose their question. What would you recommend for municipalities in this situation, or at least municipal actors in this situation? And then maybe add a second question, and that's just, is this experience in Ontario analogous to how other provinces are experiencing?
Yeah, so this actually goes back to that second enabler around interconnection requirements. Because local distribution companies in Ontario, in most places, they all have their own rules, their own guidelines and technical requirements for how you interconnect. It tends to be a very burdensome and cumbersome and lengthy process. So a lot of people who might be interested in doing this kind of get a little bit, I'd say, disenchanted by the time and the amount of money for permitting and all the things that come with that. Also, again, if you don't know where you can connect on the system, so again, that visibility of, am I okay to do this here? Am I going to be the fifth person on the system that has to invest in a bunch of infrastructure to put my EV charger in or to put whatever it is I'm trying to do in? You're going to have a hard time. I think this does come back to interconnection and making it very clean and clear where and what is needed and when. And then also, I think local distribution companies still, again, the ISO is enabling and the OEB is enabling some of this work, but they're still not compensating appropriately at the local distribution company level. As much as they're being asked to look at non-wire solutions, if I was a local distribution company, I'd be way more interested in figuring out, maybe I can do a few of these little non-wire solutions, but overarchingly, I earn my money by building capital infrastructure. I'm going to continue to try to do that as much as humanly possible.
Great. Thanks, Kari. I think we've got time for maybe one question. We'll see. And reflecting, hindsight being 2020 and all, perhaps I should have asked questions along these lines at the beginning, but this is a pretty technical and complex topic, demand side management and DER integration. And it can be a little bit challenging for people that are uninitiated to wrap their heads around it. So just stepping back, when we think about what is it that we're in the biggest picture that we're talking about, would you say it's a fair characterization of what your argument is, that this is about moving from a utility owned infrastructure model, centralized, to something where the utility is really acting more as a system operator or something like that, pulling on all sorts of different resources in the community, regardless of who actually owns those resources or infrastructure?
That's exactly what it is. So yes, it's really a distributed system operator model instead of just facility owned. And the difference is I absolutely don't think utilities need to own storage. I don't think they need to own solar. They deal with the poles and wires and they're very capable in planning and understanding where on the grid that energy is needed. And the other piece of this, again, I said these are four enablers. There's a bunch of other stuff, and it would be procurement rules. So how do utilities procure? Because again, I don't think it's necessarily that they own, but they should be long-term contracts. and they should go for 10 years or something. So that developers have that understanding that they're going to get paid a revenue stream for a considerable amount of time in order to provide these services. And I also think you have to make those connections, not connections, you have to make the rules of procurement easy for utilities to do that. Bilateral contracts aren't going to work with small numbers of DER. So how do we change that? Because right now, every time you need to do something as a utility, you have to put out an RFP and have a one-to-one contract with somebody, and that's just not going to work. So that's the other piece, is how do we change procurement rules and understanding of how to procure these services? And the model is absolutely DSO, basically a local grid market mechanism that pays the DER through the utility, and then cost savings can be shared or performance incentive mechanisms can be put through because you've now taken the steps to reduce how much you need to build that capital infrastructure as a utility.
Excellent. That was very helpful. And I very much appreciate it, Kari. Unfortunately, we are out of time for more questions, although there are many more questions that I did not get to. If I missed yours, I apologize. It's not that it wasn't important, it's that there was many to get through and we just don't have all the time in the world. I'd like to conclude by again thanking you, Kari, for taking the time to come and share your research. It's very exciting. It's very interesting. I personally will be looking to follow up with you to talk a little bit about what's happening in Ontario on the DER evaluation. I'm really interested in that topic. And I'll take the opportunity at the last seconds here to put in a plug for Efficiency Canada's upcoming Canada Home Energy Justice Conference in Ottawa. It's being held October 8th to 9th. The registration is still open. I don't know if you can access this link through the PDF itself, but I'm sure it's available from our website as well. Oh, and there it is down below in the chat. It's going to be an excellent event. This is the second one that we've held 2 years in a row, and we're really looking forward to it. Many of us are working diligently in the next 2 weeks to make sure that it happens and goes really well. Hope to see you there. Thanks again, Kari. Looking forward to seeing everybody a future DiscoverEE. It looks like our next one is on enabling decarbonization in Canada's condo sector. Sounds like a good topic.